I still remember the silence in the room after I laid the contract on the table. Not the polite kind of silence, the kind that stretches and tightens like a noose, wrapping around everyone's pride and choking the smug right out of their faces. My Aunt Diane set down her wine glass. My brother Ryan's grin froze mid-smirk, and Mom finally looked at me like I was something more than the family failure. The poor one. The daughter who never quite figured things out. The one they whispered about after Sunday dinners, the freelancer, the single one, the one who still rents. I was the one who had just signed a contract to buy a $3.2 million property in the hills of Asheville. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Emily Hart. I'm 33 years old, the middle child in a family that treats middle children like afterthoughts, not the firstborn legacy, not the baby everyone adores. Just the one expected to smile quietly and be grateful for scraps. My older brother Ryan has always been the family's golden boy, charming, business savvy, or so they think, always spinning some startup idea that seems to soak up our parents' retirement savings. My younger sister Lily? She's the princess. Gorgeous, poised, married a dentist. Mom says Lily's laugh lights up the room. Meanwhile, I always look tired. It wasn't always like this. Growing up in a small town in North Carolina, our dad was the anchor. Steady, fair, and endlessly kind. Every Friday night, we'd gather around the scratched-up dining table he built himself and talk about our dreams. I'd always say I wanted to design buildings, and he'd nod like he could already see the skyline I'd one day shape. But everything changed after he died. It was a stroke, sudden, brutal, no warning. He was there one day and gone the next. And when he left, something in Mom left too. She became colder, harder. The kind of woman who measured success in titles and tax brackets. She started comparing us mostly to each other, but sometimes to other people's kids. Ryan got praised for every mediocre achievement like he was the next Elon Musk. Lily was delicate and flawless, and apparently farted glitter. I was tolerated. Mostly ignored. At 24, I moved out after a particularly ugly fight with Mom. I had just lost my job at a small architecture firm that downsized. She called me a freeloader at the dinner table. Said she wasn't running a shelter. That night, I packed a single suitcase and left. In the years that followed, I lived small. Real small. A 400 square foot studio in Raleigh, dollar store dishes, cheap coffee, and design gigs that barely covered rent. But I hustled. I learned everything I could about real estate. I started doing freelance architecture work for investors, then developers. Slowly, painfully, I started climbing. I didn't talk about it. I didn't post it. I didn't ask for applause. They never asked anyway. Until that family meeting. They said it was just a family update. I only went because Lily texted me. Please come, just this once. I miss you, Fide. That heart emoji made me want to throw my phone. But I went. Maybe I missed them too. Or maybe I was just tired of always being the one left out. It was a Sunday afternoon. Mom's house looked exactly the same, beige everything, the smell of lemon polish, her collection of Precious Moments dolls still lined up on the mantel like creepy pastel soldiers. I brought a bottle of Napa Valley Cab. Ryan took one look and chuckled. You can afford this now? He asked, eyebrows raised. I smiled and said nothing. Turned out the meeting was about Grandma's house. She had passed a month earlier, and now the vultures were circling. The heirs were divvying up her estate like a garage sale. I knew they wouldn't include me. I had heard through the grapevine that Mom was planning to sell the property and split it among the responsible kids. They didn't even pretend. Emily wasn't around, Aunt Diane said. She didn't help with anything. She's not entitled. I did visit. I brought Grandma homemade banana bread and read her the newspaper when her eyes started going. But I didn't Instagram it, so I guess it didn't count. I mean, Emily's doing fine, right? Ryan added, smirking. She's got her little freelance thing going. Then Mom delivered the kill shot. Poor Emily. Always trying so hard. Not mean. Not sarcastic. Just. dismissive. Like someone describing an injured animal. That's when I pulled the contract out of my tote bag. The real estate contract. With my name at the bottom. The moment I pulled out the contract, the air shifted. Not dramatically, not instantly, but like a subtle current moving beneath still water. Ryan leaned forward, curiosity flickering in his eyes, trying to catch the headline on the crisp white document. Lily stiffened beside him, and Aunt Diane blinked like she wasn't sure if I was joking or just being difficult again. I laid it on the glass table carefully, like a poker player placing a royal flush. Before we go any further, I said, keeping my voice even, I just want to clarify something. Mom, perched on the edge of her usual chair like a queen at court, crossed her arms. Emily, no one's attacking you. This is just a family matter. We're discussing the estate. Right. And I'm part of this family, so I thought it might be relevant to share this. I slid the contract across the table. It was thick. 42 pages of legally binding documentation, with my name printed clearly on the first page. Emily Hart, buyer. The property? A historic, commercial, residential building in downtown Asheville, fully paid in cash, and about to be flipped into a mixed-use development I designed myself. Ryan reached for it, flipping to the back like he didn't believe what he was seeing. Wait, you bought a building? His voice cracked slightly. Yup, I said. Closed last week. Just thought you all might want to know what your poor sister's been up to. Silence. Even Lily, who always tried to play peacekeeper, looked stunned. How did you? She began. You're still renting that place in Raleigh, right? Was. I moved out a month ago. I'm relocating to Asheville. Full-time architect and developer now. I watched the words settle in, watched the calculations behind Ryan's eyes. Mom narrowed hers. Why didn't you tell anyone? Would you have listened? I replied, sharper than I meant. The last time I told you I was working on a commercial project, you said maybe I should focus on something more stable, like office admin. Aunt Diane gave a little cough, as if to break the awkwardness. Well, that's surprising, dear. But it doesn't really have anything to do with Grandma's estate. This is about family responsibility, not real estate deals. Right, I said. Responsibility. Let's talk about that. I pulled out my phone and tapped open a folder of photos. There were pictures of me sitting by Grandma's bedside, of the banana bread I brought her every Sunday for 6 months, of the new winter coat I bought her after Mom forgot. I may not have been around for the last few weeks because I was traveling to meet with investors, but I was there. More than any of you. Lily flinched. Ryan looked at the table. Mom didn't react at all. It's not about who visited the most, she said flatly. It's about legacy. Grandma always said she wanted her house to stay in the family. Ryan and Lily are both married. They're settled. They can use the space wisely. And I can't? You live in a 1-bedroom and work out of coffee shops, she replied. You're poor. I finished for her. The word sat there like a stone in the room. You've all said it. Maybe not directly, but you've said it. And you know what? I let you believe it. I let you think I was struggling because I didn't want to explain every step of my climb, but that ends today. I grabbed the contract again, holding it up. I paid cash for a $3.2 million building. I designed the renovation plan myself. I got backing from a pair of investors who believed in me more than my own family ever has. So don't tell me I'm not part of this family discussion. Don't treat me like a stray who wandered into your estate meeting. I belong at this table. Mom's lips pressed into a thin line. That building. Where did the money come from? Her voice was low, accusatory. I earned it. Over the last 8 years, one client after another. Then I flipped a duplex last year, doubled the return, and reinvested everything. No scams. No shady deals. Just hard work and a refusal to give up after you wrote me off. Ryan laughed, but it sounded nervous. You always were dramatic. No, Ryan, I snapped. You're dramatic. You still owe Mom 50 grand for your last app idea. She calls that an investment. I call it favoritism. Lily put a hand on my arm, trying to calm me. This isn't helping. No, I said, brushing her hand away. It is helping. Because for the first time in years, I'm not shrinking at this table. I'm not apologizing for being me. I'm not pretending that I don't see how you all conveniently excluded me from everything. Aunt Diane finally spoke again, trying to be the peacemaker. Look, emotions are running high. Maybe we should just take a breather, revisit this next week. No, I interrupted. You wanted a meeting. You made decisions about Grandma's property without me. You called me here to rubber stamp it or stay silent. Well, surprise, I have my own plans now. Mom stood. So what? You want a share of the house? No, I said quietly. I want acknowledgement. I want you to admit that you were wrong about me. That I'm not some pathetic middle child who never figured it out. I want to be seen. For once. The room was quiet again. But not out of disbelief anymore. This time, it felt like something cracked, like a truth had finally cut through years of noise and pretense. Whether they liked it or not, they were finally seeing me. All of me. I don't know what I expected after that meeting. Applause? Regret? Maybe just a phone call. But as the days passed, my phone stayed silent. Not a single message from Mom. Nothing from Ryan or Aunt Diane. Lily sent one short text the next evening. That was intense. Hope you're okay, Serp, and then disappeared too. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself I had outgrown them, that their silence was nothing more than proof of the emotional distance I'd already accepted years ago. But truthfully, it hurt. More than I wanted to admit. I sat in my half-unpacked new apartment in Asheville, surrounded by shipping boxes and architectural sketches, and realized I was still waiting. Still hoping. For what, though? A pat on the back? A crumb of pride from Mom? A message that said, "You did good, Em?" It was stupid. I was 33. I'd just accomplished something huge. I was finally standing on my own, not only surviving but thriving, and yet, all I could think about was how my mother looked through me like I was some stranger at her table. The worst part wasn't the meeting itself. It was the quiet exclusion that followed. The same kind of exclusion that had threaded through the last decade of my life, sometimes in whispers, sometimes in bold letters. Like when I didn't get an invitation to Lily's bachelorette weekend. She told me later it was just for bridesmaids, even though she'd added a few of her husband's cousins who she'd met once. Or how Ryan constantly posted family BBQ photos, online captions like "Heartland Strong Period," and I'd be the only sibling not pictured. The narrative had always been subtle but firm. Emily doesn't really belong. She's the outlier. Even back when Dad was alive, there were signs. He used to encourage me to speak up more. Don't let them talk over you, he'd say after dinners, when Ryan would dominate the table with his high school football stories and Lily would twirl her hair, complaining about boys. He saw me. That's why losing him hit so hard. Without him, there was no one left to pull up a chair for me. That next weekend, I saw another post from Ryan. A photo of Grandma's old house already half cleared out. He stood on the porch next to Mom, holding a pair of hedge clippers like he'd done a hard day's work. The caption? Prepping for the future. Love this family. My chest tightened. No one told me they were doing that. I hadn't been consulted, hadn't even been informed. They were moving ahead like I didn't exist. And the thing that burned most was the comments. Such a wonderful legacy, someone wrote. Your mom must be so proud. And there she was, smiling in the photo like nothing had ever happened, like I had never slammed that contract on her table, like I hadn't asked to be acknowledged, like I hadn't fought tooth and nail to stand tall in a room that always tried to shrink me. I picked up my phone, hovered over Mom's name in my contacts. My thumb hesitated. What would I even say? Why didn't you include me? Why are you pretending I don't matter? But I didn't send anything. Not yet. Instead, I scrolled through old texts. The last message she'd sent me was 6 weeks ago, a forwarded link to an article titled 10 Freelance Jobs That Actually Pay, with a single note. Maybe you could try one of these? No punctuation. Just that passive-aggressive sting. That had been the tone for years. Suggestions disguised as encouragement, but laced with judgment. The following Monday, I tried calling Lily. She didn't answer. I waited, then sent her a text. "Hey, can we talk for a sec?" No reply. By Thursday, I gave up. I buried myself in my work, started drafting layout revisions for the property, called contractors, set up meetings. But even in the middle of designing floor plans, I kept catching myself zoning out, thinking about the last 20 years of my life like scenes from a movie. All the moments I'd been left out, my college graduation, they came late and left early. My birthday dinners always rescheduled, or just forgotten entirely. And then that time I was sick for a week, in and out of urgent care, and no one called. They always had an excuse. "We thought you were busy. You didn't tell us. We didn't want to bother you." But the truth was simpler. I was never part of their plan. I wasn't the kind of daughter Mom could brag about at church. I wasn't the sibling Ryan could team up with for family investments. I wasn't Lily's confidant. I was just the spare tire useful in emergencies, but kept out of sight. Late one night, as I stared at a spreadsheet of renovation costs, I finally allowed myself to cry. Not the loud, theatrical kind, just slow, quiet tears that came without asking. The kind that felt old, like they'd been waiting years to fall. I didn't want to admit it, but I felt abandoned. Not just by them, but by the version of myself that thought if I worked hard enough, I'd earn their love. But the thing about feeling excluded your whole life is that eventually, you stop expecting doors to open for you. And that's when you start building your own. A week after the meeting, I received a manila envelope in the mail. No return address, just my name and a smudge of ink where the sender had scratched something out. I knew what it was before I even opened it. Inside, a typed letter from my mother and a copy of the probate filing for Grandma's estate. There were no greetings, no warmth. Just one clean paragraph that read, "Dear Emily, as discussed during our family gathering, your name will not be included in the division of estate assets, PR family agreement, and based on prior contributions and involvement. We appreciate your understanding and wish you the best in your future endeavors." I read it twice. Then a third time. My chest felt tight, not because I hadn't expected it, but because seeing it in writing made it real in a way that no passive-aggressive comment ever had. This was no longer emotional distance. This was legal erasure. They'd filed everything behind my back. The signatures were there, Ryan, Lily, Mom, even Aunt Diane as a witness. All formal, all clean. My name wasn't anywhere. Not even a courtesy mention. Not even a thank you. It didn't matter that I had sat by Grandma's bed reading to her. Didn't matter that I had delivered her groceries when no one else showed up during that snowstorm. Didn't matter that I had been the one who fought with the hospital over her insurance gaps while Ryan was off pitching his third failed startup and Lily was getting Botox consultations. None of that counted because I didn't have the right pedigree. I didn't have the wedding ring, the suburban home, the curated life they respected. I stared at that letter for a long time. I thought about calling a lawyer. I even bookmarked a few local probate attorneys, but something in me hesitated. Was it worth the fight? Would it change anything? Or would it just feed into their narrative that I was emotional, bitter, unreasonable? That I was always looking for conflict where there was just family decisions? 2 days later, I got a voicemail from Ryan. Short. Clipped. "Hey, just a heads up. We're meeting with a realtor next Tuesday to list Grandma's house. Thought you should know. You don't need to come or anything, just wanted to keep you in the loop." I played it back 3 times. "You don't need to come." That was the key phrase. He'd called not to include me, but to preempt any pushback. A warning disguised as a courtesy. I texted him anyway. "I'd like to be there. It's still Grandma's house." He never replied. Tuesday came and went. I only found out later through Lily's Instagram story a blurry video of her and Ryan in the backyard with the realtor, laughing as they talked about all the potential and renovation ideas. She tagged it, "Number Legacy Living" with a sparkle emoji. I watched it in stunned silence. I wasn't even tagged. The truth hit me slowly, like molasses pouring over my head. They weren't just excluding me, they were rewriting the story. In their version, I never showed up. In their version, I had always been distant, indifferent, absent. They weren't just taking Grandma's house, they were taking my history with her. My care, my love, my effort. And no one would ever know the truth, because the people who mattered didn't care, and the people who cared didn't matter to them. Then came the kicker. A friend of mine who works in local development sent me a forwarded email. It was from Ryan, a pitch to investors using Grandma's property as an exciting multi-unit rental opportunity. My friend wrote, "Didn't know your family was getting into the development game. Thought you were the only one." I stared at the email in disbelief. Ryan hadn't told me he planned to develop the house. He had no license, no background. And worse, he had used some of the design language I had shown him years ago, almost word for word, from an old concept pitch I'd shared at a Thanksgiving dinner, back when I still believed we could collaborate. I felt sick. This wasn't just exclusion anymore. This was theft. Theft of ideas, theft of dignity, theft of space. I sat in my office that night, the lights off, staring at the blueprint of my own project, the one I had signed, the one I had worked for, and I realized just how far they had gone to shut me out. Not out of malice, necessarily, but out of convenience. It was easier for them to write me out than to recognize me. What stung most was Mom. She had the power to include me. Just a word from her, a sentence, and everything could have shifted. But she didn't. And that told me all I needed to know. Her silence wasn't neutral, it was chosen. I opened the probate envelope again, reread the letter. At the bottom, in her unmistakable handwriting, she'd scrawled one line. "I hope you understand." I did. I understood perfectly. I didn't respond to Mom's letter. I couldn't. Not because I didn't have words, God knows I had too many, but because every time I sat down to write, the weight of futility pinned my fingers still. What could I possibly say to a woman who had taken the time to scribble 5 cold words at the bottom of a legal letter instead of picking up the phone? What message could I send that wouldn't be twisted into another confirmation of my emotional instability? So I didn't send a reply. I focused on the only thing that had ever given me peace, my work. As the renovations in Asheville kicked off, I threw myself into the project with a level of intensity that bordered on obsession. I was on site before sunrise most mornings, overseeing demolition and layout, guiding contractors through every line of my design like it was sacred scripture. I reviewed material deliveries, checked load-bearing estimates myself, and insisted on a custom window layout that the contractors originally said was too complicated. I made it work. I always made it work. Still, some nights, I'd lie in bed with my laptop open, staring at the glowing numbers of the project budget and wondering why I couldn't stop thinking about my family. Why I kept reaching for my phone to check messages I knew wouldn't be there. I told myself I didn't care, but I did. I wanted them to see, to acknowledge me. Not out of pity or surprise, but with the respect they so freely handed to Ryan, just for breathing. So I decided to try, one last time, to bridge the gap. Not to ask for anything, just to show them. I sent out an email. Simple, professional. I attached a PDF of my project's development brochure renderings, architectural notes, projected return sand, added a short note. Thought you might want to see what I've been working on. Hope everyone's doing well, Emily. I hit send before I could second guess it. A few days later, Lily replied. Her message was polite, almost sweet. Wow, Em, this looks amazing. So proud of you. Asheville is lucky to have you. That emoji again. I stared at it for a full minute. I appreciated the words, but they rang hollow, like clapping after a performance you never watched. Still, I responded. Thanks, hope you're doing okay too. Nothing from Ryan. Nothing from Mom. I tried harder. I invited them to the soft opening of the building's downstairs cafeone of the commercial spaces I'd leased to a young couple starting a vegan bakery. I sent physical invitations. Beautiful, thick cardstock envelopes with custom embossing and a soft blush ink. I didn't just want them to come. I wanted them to feel something. To feel me. They didn't show. The opening went beautifully. Local press came. My name was mentioned in the city business journal. Investors praised my vision. People shook my hand and asked if I had plans for another development. I smiled, answered confidently, posed for photos next to the oversized scissors as we cut the ribbon. But when the cameras left and the crowd thinned out, I stood by the cafe's wide front window and watched the cars roll by, hoping irrationally that maybe one of them was Mom's. That maybe she'd pull up last minute, walk in awkwardly, and say something simple like, "You did good, Emily." But she never came. And the hurt I had stuffed deep down began to crack through. I started waking up with a knot in my stomach, one I couldn't tie to any contractor delays or inspection worries. I wasn't sleeping. I kept reliving old memories, moments I hadn't thought about in years, like when I got my first job offer out of college and Mom's only response was, "At least you'll have health insurance now." Or the time I won a regional design award and brought the certificate home, and she left it on the counter until it got stained by coffee. No matter how far I climbed, they kept shifting the goalposts. And I kept chasing. So I did the one thing I hadn't dared in years. I asked. One evening, after too many hours rereading old texts and emails, I sent Mom a message. Direct. Honest. "Do you see me now? Does any of this make you proud?" The 3 dots blinked for a moment, then disappeared. No reply. The next morning, I found myself on a walk through the neighborhood behind my building. I passed a small house, the kind with peeling paint and a front yard full of wildflowers, and saw a girl about 7 years old drawing on the sidewalk with chalk. Her mom stood nearby, clapping, laughing, beaming like her daughter had just painted the Sistine Chapel. I stood there for a second too long. The mom glanced up, caught my eyes, and smiled politely. I smiled back, but something in my chest tightened. I realized I had spent most of my life trying to earn the kind of love that little girl got without asking. That night, I stopped waiting. I stopped refreshing my inbox, stopped checking voicemail. I decided that my recognition wouldn't come from them. Maybe it never had, maybe it never would. But what I'd built in Asheville was real. The people I was helping were real. My work, my sweat, my growth, none of it required their validation. Still, a part of me ached for it. A part of me always would. But the difference now? I'd learned how to move forward anyway. The confrontation came faster than I expected, and from the last person I thought would throw the first punch. It was Lily. Sweet, polished, people-pleasing Lily, the one who had always played mediator, always sent heart emojis after tense conversations, always insisted, "We're still family, no matter what." She called me on a Thursday evening, voice sharp, tone clipped. No greetings, no pretense. Just straight into it. "Emily, what the hell are you doing?" I blinked at my phone, surprised. "Excuse me?" "You went to the city council," she snapped. "Ryan found out. He said your name was on the attendance sheet for last Tuesday's zoning review." I leaned back in my chair, the light from my office window casting long shadows across my drafting table. I didn't say anything against him, if that's what you're implying. I went because they were reviewing a nearby district, and I needed to stay informed. "He says you undermined him. Said you raised questions about his proposal. Something about structural risks with the original foundation?" I paused. That wasn't personal, it's a known issue with that area. It was relevant to the discussion. "You embarrassed him, Emily. You embarrassed all of us." There it was, that word again. Embarrassed. That's what it always boiled down to. My existence, my voice, my presence was somehow shameful unless I was silent and smiling. I took a breath. If Ryan's planning to demo and rebuild on Grandma's property, he should be aware of the foundational instability. I was doing the responsible thing, what I would do for any project in that zone. You could have called him, you could have said something privately instead of showing up at a public forum. I tried calling him. He never responds. None of you do. There was a pause. Then Lily's voice softened, but not with sympathy. With warning. "Emily, I'm serious. You need to stop poking around. This is bigger than you think. Mom's upset. Ryan's furious. He says you're trying to sabotage him. I'm not, I said, though I didn't bother trying to sound convincing. Because maybe I was. Maybe a small part of me wanted to see his sloppy plan crumble under the weight of real due diligence. Maybe I was tired of watching him skate through life on charm and lies while I clawed for every inch of success. You know he's out of his depth, Lily. He doesn't even understand zoning ordinances. He has people helping him, she said quickly, as if that made it okay. And Mom's backing him. Of course she is. The conversation ended with an icy, "Just stay out of it, Em. Please." 2 days later, I got a cease and desist letter. From Ryan's attorney. Printed on thick, overpriced stationery, it accused me of interfering with private business dealings, spreading misleading concerns, and causing potential financial damage through public defamation. I laughed out loud when I read it until I realized Mom's name was CC'd on the letterhead. Her name. Not as a passive recipient, but as a co-signer. That one hit like a sucker punch. She wasn't just passively letting it happen. She was involved. She'd chosen a side and it wasn't mine. I spent the rest of that day in a fog, trying to concentrate, trying to draft new layouts for my next pitch. But my mind kept circling back to that thick paper and the thin thread that still tied me to people who would rather see me silenced than celebrated. Later that week, I drove by Grandma's old house. I hadn't been back since before she died. It was surreal, seeing the windows covered in plastic, the porch stripped bare. There was a dumpster in the driveway filled with old furniture, her rocking chair, the faded flowered sofa, the lamp I'd helped her rewire the summer I was 16. Gone. Like she was never there. Like I was never there. And standing in front of it, the cold December wind biting at my coat, I realized something else. They didn't just want the house. They wanted to erase everything that didn't fit their version of events. So I called a lawyer. Not to sue. Not yet. But to understand my rights. I wanted to know if I could contest the estate, or at least file an objection to the zoning plan under my name as a local property owner and architect. I wasn't going to let Ryan bulldoze history just to slap his name on a rental unit. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Kelly, was calm and efficient. You have a few angles, she said, after reviewing the will. They excluded you, but you have documentation of care and involvement. That carries weight. And if they used your design language without permission, there could be an intellectual property angle. It was like someone lit a fire in my gut. For the first time in weeks, I felt focused. Ready. I wasn't going to beg them to see me anymore. I was going to make sure they couldn't ignore me. The thing about fighting back is no one tells you how isolating it is. Everyone loves a redemption story, but they rarely stick around for the part where the protagonist drowns in doubt, buried under silence, wondering if she made a terrible mistake by standing up in the first place. After the lawyers' meeting, I had a plain a real one. Legal, strategic, grounded. But plans don't fill the gaps left by betrayal. They don't warm your apartment when the calls stop coming and the holidays roll in like cold waves hitting stone. Christmas came and went. I didn't get an invitation from Mom, not even a passive-aggressive text pretending she'd forgotten to include me. Lily sent a digital custom pre-made image of a snowy landscape with glittery cursive that read, "Wishing you peace and joy," but there wasn't a single word written just for me. Nothing that said she actually thought about me. I spent the morning alone, watching reruns of cooking shows and eating reheated lasagna from a paper plate. I turned off my phone by noon because I couldn't bear to see more photos of my siblings clinking wine glasses in matching pajamas while Mom beamed in the background like she was hosting a Hallmark special. I wasn't part of that world. I never had been. But this year, the rejection was louder, written in ink, echoed in legal threats, carried in the quiet that followed me like a shadow. I started spiraling. Slowly, then quickly. I stayed up until 3 a.m. every night for nearly a week, rereading every message, replaying every memory. I watched old family videos on a flash drive I found in the back of my closet, birthdays, holidays, lazy Sunday morning, sand in all of them. I looked like someone trying too hard to be seen. Always off to the side, always smiling a beat too long, clapping a little too loudly. Always trying to earn a seat at a table that was never mine to begin with. There was one clip I couldn't stop watching. My 8th birthday. We were in the backyard, cake on the picnic table, streamers swaying in the breeze. Ryan got to light the candles. Lily got to pass out the party hats. I stood between them, hands folded, waiting for someone to notice me. When I blew out the candles, Mom barely glanced up from her conversation with Aunt Diane. Dad was the only one who clapped. I watched that video 5 times. By the 6th, I was crying so hard I couldn't breathe. I felt pathetic. I'd built something real. I'd succeeded. I had my name on a property. I was paying a legal team out of my own earnings. And yet, none of it shielded me from the aching hollowness of being unchosen. I kept asking myself the same question: why wasn't I enough? Not just now, but back then. What did Ryan have that I didn't? What made Lily lovable and me inconvenient? I went days without answering texts, stopped responding to emails, let calls go to voicemail even from work. I missed 2 client meetings. Kelly, my lawyer, called twice, left voicemails checking in, asking for documents. I didn't respond. I just couldn't. I was paralyzed. And then came the worst day of it all. I got an email from the city planning office. Ryan's zoning application had been fast-tracked approved under a conditional clause that waived the public appeal window due to lack of community objections. It was done. Final. He was getting the permits. They'd won. I stared at the email for 20 minutes, unable to move. Then I slammed my laptop shut and curled up on the floor of my apartment, heart pounding so loud I thought it might explode. I hadn't cried like that in years. Ugly, gut-wrenching sobs that shook my whole body. It wasn't about the house. Not really. It was about what it meant. They had erased me. Officially, legally, emotionally. I was nothing. The next morning, I couldn't get out of bed. I stared at the ceiling for hours, too numb to cry again, too angry to fall asleep. I skipped breakfast, skipped my shower, skipped the check-in call with my project lead. I didn't want to be strong anymore. I didn't want to fight. I just wanted someone to hold me and tell me that I mattered, that I wasn't crazy, that the pain I was feeling was real and valid and not just the overreaction they all kept accusing me of. But there was no one. No one came. No one called. I was completely, utterly alone. By nightfall, I sat on my apartment balcony wrapped in a blanket, drinking wine straight from the bottle, watching the city lights flicker like a distant promise. It was quiet up there. Too quiet. And for a terrifying moment, I wondered what would happen if I just stopped trying. Stopped pushing. Stopped everything. But something held me. Not hope, not strength. Just the faint memory of my father's voice, low and steady in the back of my mind, whispering something he used to say when I was small and crying in my room. You don't have to win to be worthy, Emmy. You just have to show up. Every day, that's what brave looks like. So the next morning, I showered. I made coffee. I opened my laptop. And I called Kelly back. I woke up the next day feeling raw, but not defeated. The ache in my chest had settled into something sharper: determination. I called Kelly, and she laid out our new plan. There were 2 fronts we could pursue: contesting the probate on the grounds that Grandma's will was improperly executed, and filing for intellectual property misuse against Ryan for appropriating my design plans. I spent that morning gathering evidence: photos of my grandma visits, dated receipts, drafts of my old concept sketches with timestamps. With each document I uploaded to Kelly's secure portal, something inside me uncoiled. I wasn't just a hurt daughter anymore. I was a strategist. A guardian of truth. That afternoon, while reviewing zoning files, Kelly paused. "Emily," she said, voice low. She held up a PD phone I hadn't seen before, a previous version of Grandma's will from 5 years ago, drafted in standardized template, naming only Dad and Mom as executors, and including a clause. In the event of the death of either executor, All children of the testator shall share equally. That meant it included me. Lily and Ryan shared everything because they were still alive. Dad was dead. Mom didn't qualify. This version superseded the later one, legally. They'd used a later probate document but failed to void this older version internally. I felt my heartbeat speed. They tried to erase me, but they missed one detail, I whispered. Kelly nodded. This changes everything. We can move to invalidate the final probate and reinstate a version of the will that includes you. I stared at the clause over and over. It felt like someone had lit a match in a dark room. I called Mom. Her voicemail picked up after the first ring. I didn't leave a message. Instead, I texted, "We need to talk. I found something important." No reply. Friday morning arrived, and I got an email from Kelly. Prepared your motion for probate contest. Review attached. I opened the PDF, crisp legal argument delineating the inconsistency between the will versions, my documented care for Grandma, my position as executor in the earlier draft. I felt an electric shock of vindication. I'd been read out, but the law read differently. That afternoon, I published a concise press release via my architectural firm's PR contact. It read, "Local architect and developer Emily Hart announces legal contest to probate of family estate due to significant inconsistencies in will execution." Within 2 hours, a regional blog picked it up. Local developer to challenge Hart family estate over Asheville property. My phone buzzed, nonstop messages from clients, friends, industry contacts. No one mentioned Grandma's house. They mentioned me. My name. My fight. By evening, I had momentum. Sunday came, and I flew to Raleigh to serve the probate papers on Mom and Ryan. I was nervous, but I couldn't stop. I walked into Mom's living room, the same beige furniture, the same plastic flower arrangement, but something was different. I was different. I handed her the envelope without emotion. Ryan took it with a bitter glance. Mom's face went porcelain white. I didn't cry, I just said, "You'll see me now." End of quote. They retreated into angry whispers. I stayed until my presence rattled them. Then left. Back in Asheville, I waited for reaction. 2 weeks later, I received an email from Aunt Diane. Millicent Hart requests a mediated family discussion. The topic, emotional harm and estate resolution. My heart hammered. They'd invited me. Maybe they wanted to negotiate. Or maybe they planned to minimize me again. I didn't care, so long as I was invited. The meeting location, Mom's lawyer's office. Neutral ground. A round table with leather chairs. Mom entered first, no greeting. Ryan followed, steely-eyed. Aunt Diane brought Lily last, bright-faced but visibly nervous. I sat across from them, papers stacked in front of me, legal binder open. I looked calm. I felt like steel. Mom spoke first. "Emily, what are you doing? You're tearing this family apart." I took a breath. I'm asking to be a part of it again. You erased me. I'm just making space to stand." Ryan rolled his eyes. "You're embarrassing us." "I'm trying to do something productive here." I leaned forward. "Funny, I'm the one with architectural licenses, development experience, and a signed real estate contract worth over $3 million. You're relying on half-baked plans and charm. I have documents, expertise, and legal precedent." Aunt Diane tried to interject. "Can we focus on resolution?" I held up the earlier will clause and the probate motion. "We can. If you allow that version to proceed on, that includes me. Or we can continue this in probate court. I'm prepared for either. But make no mistake, I have evidence. Family history. And I'm not going away." Mom stared at the documents. For a moment, her facade cracked. "This isn't about fairness," she said quietly. "It's about control." I felt a pang of sorrow crossed with relief. Control is a fragile thing, Mom. It's earned and broken. Right now, I'm demanding what was due. Silence fell. Lily shifted in her seat. Maybe we should go outside, breathe. This is a lot." I nodded. Take a break, yes. But don't mistake my patience for weakness. After the mediation adjourned, Mom approached me outside. She hesitated, then said, in a soft, quiet voice, "I didn't know you kept all those pictures. The ones with Grandma. I thought you were gone." I looked at her hard. I was quiet. "You stopped asking." Mom's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry." She swallowed. Maybe I was too rigid. I didn't answer. I just watched the wind blow dead leaves around her feet. That night, I drafted a press follow-up. Family mediation scheduled. Emily Hart brings architectural and legal expertise to ensure fair estate resolution. The media interest spiked quotes from legal analysts, community chatter. People were seeing me. I realized then that I hadn't just found a legal opening. I'd found my voice firm, visible, unstoppable. And for the first time, I wasn't alone. The final confrontation didn't happen in a courtroom or behind the polished doors of a mediator's office. It happened in the one place I swore I'd never set foot in again, Mom's house. She insisted. Said we needed to talk, as a family, without lawyers or notaries or media leaks. Against Kelly's advice, I agreed. Not because I trusted her, but because I needed to see it through. I needed to hear, face to face, what they thought they had the right to take from me, and why. The moment I stepped inside, the air felt heavy with memory. That same lemon polish smell. The hallway mirror where I used to check my hair before school. The small crack on the tile near the entry. Dad had always meant to fix that. He never got around to it. Ryan was already sitting in the living room, arms spread arrogantly along the back of the couch like he was lounging on a throne. Lily stood nearby, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Mom sat in her armchair, stiff, composed, and visibly tired. "Emily," Mom said, not quite warm but not hostile either. "Thank you for coming." I sat down across from her. "You wanted a conversation. I'm here." Ryan leaned forward. "Let's skip the performance. What's it going to take for you to back down?" I blinked slowly. Back down from what? From claiming my legal inheritance? From calling out theft? He scoffed. "You always think everyone's against you. This was supposed to be a family matter, not a war." "No, Ryan," I said evenly. "You made it a war when you used my designs, pitched them as yours, and filed for permits without acknowledging me. That's not family, that's fraud." He stood, pacing like a caged animal. "Do you even hear yourself? You were never around. You moved away, you stopped coming to holidays, you isolated yourself. We assumed you weren't interested." I laughed bitterly. "No, you decided I wasn't worthy. There's a difference." Lily stepped in. "Everyone's hurt, Em. But maybe we can find a middle ground." "Stop," I cut in. "You can't negotiate justice when one side got erased." Mom cleared her throat. "This isn't helping. I asked you here to resolve this before it tears us apart." I turned to her. "It's already torn. You just didn't notice because you never looked back." The room went quiet. Then, finally, Mom spoke again softly, but with something cracking under the surface. "After your father died, I didn't know what to do. He held this family together. Without him, I couldn't be soft. I had to make hard decisions. I had to hold things together." I studied her face. The fine lines that had deepened over the years. The exhaustion behind her eyes. I'd waited my entire life to hear something like that, an explanation. Not an apology, but a window into the woman who had raised me with such sharp distance. "So you held it together," I said quietly. "By pushing me out?" "You pulled away," she said, her voice growing defensive again. "You made choices we didn't understand. You stopped fitting." My voice broke. "I didn't stop fitting. You stopped making space. Every time I tried to talk about my work, my struggles, you shut me down. You told me I was wasting my time, that I needed to be realistic. Do you know how many nights I sat alone in that studio apartment thinking I was nothing because you couldn't look at me with even a flicker of pride?" Mom looked down at her hands. I turned to Ryan. "And you, how many times did you borrow my ideas? How many times did you let me talk, then used my words in your pitches? You never asked. You just assumed I wouldn't notice. Ryan looked ready to explode. I had plans before you came along with your big city attitude and your contractor friends. You think you're smarter than everyone. No, I snapped. I know I've worked harder. I earned every cent, every permit, every investor. You just coasted on charm and connections. And now that I've done something real, something measurable, you're threatened. Lily raised her voice. Enough, all of you. She looked at each of us, her voice trembling. We've all made mistakes. But no one here is innocent. Emily, you wanted to be included, but you never told us how badly you needed that. Mom, you held on too tight to control. Ryan, you took shortcuts. But maybe we all thought we had time. Time to fix this later. And now, later is here. I was silent for a long moment. Then I stood, reached into my bag, and placed the original will on the table, the one from 5 years ago that listed all 3 children equally. I'm not leaving this room with nothing, I said. This document gives me legal ground. But more than that, it's proof. Proof that Grandma wanted me included. That I was meant to be part of this family. All along. Mom stared at the document like it was a ghost. Slowly, she nodded. I remember signing that one. Your father insisted we make it equal. He always said you had something special, even if you didn't shine the way your siblings did. The words hit me like a gut punch. And you didn't agree? She looked at me. I didn't understand you. That's not the same thing. I didn't respond. I just let the silence hold her accountable. Finally, Ryan exhaled. What do you want, Emily? Say it plain. I looked him dead in the eye. 1/3 of the estate. Public acknowledgement that the designs you submitted were mine, and my name on every future document involving the house. He looked at Mom. She gave him a slight nod, the kind that said, "Don't fight this. We've already lost." Fine, Ryan muttered. You'll get your 1/3. And the acknowledgement? He rolled his eyes. Yes. Mom stood, walked over slowly. I don't expect forgiveness, but I do hope one day we can speak without lawyers between us. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to forgive. But I was finally heard. And that was more than I'd ever been given. 3 weeks after that final meeting in Mom's living room, everything started shifting. Not in one sweeping cinematic moment, but piece by piece, like tiles clicking into place on a board I'd been quietly building for years. First came the formal agreement. Ryan's attorney sent over a draft acknowledging that the original will had legal merit and that my 1/3 share would be honored both financially and publicly. I made my revisions insisting on a public press notice of the agreement, not buried fine print, and sent it back. 2 days later, I got it signed and returned. In bold ink, under his carefully rehearsed signature, Ryan Hart acknowledged that I, Emily Hart, was a rightful heir and intellectual contributor to the project he had tried to claim for himself. Then came the press release. We published it jointly, though I wrote every word. It was professional, firm, and deliberate. It stated that the Hart family estate had come to a unified agreement honoring the equal contributions and rightful shares of all 3 Hart siblings, including the original architectural vision provided by Emily Hart. No apologies, no sugarcoating. But everything I needed was there. My name, my work, my legitimacy. That release was picked up by 2 local real estate blogs, then a mid-tier business outlet. Within a week, I had 3 new project inquiries and a call from a developer who'd previously ghosted me, now asking to collaborate on a downtown build. The irony burned, but I took the call. Not out of forgiveness, but out of strategy. Victory isn't just about proving someone wrong, it's about building something afterward that leaves them in your rearview. Ryan's reputation took a hit. Quietly, but noticeably. One of his investors pulled out after reviewing the now exposed discrepancies between his submitted designs and the original work he had borrowed without credit from my old pitches. The city's planning office flagged his application for inconsistencies in authorship, which delayed construction by another quarter. He went quiet on social media. No more Hart Legacy hashtags. No more family man photo ops on the front lawn. For a while, it looked like he might pull out of the project altogether, but he didn't. Pride wouldn't let him. He moved forward slowly, cautiously, but with my name now etched into every document, every plan, every headline. Mom called the week the release went out. I didn't answer at first. It rang 3 times. Then again later that evening. On the 3rd attempt, I let it go to voicemail, and only later that night after, pouring myself a glass of wine and breathing deeply, did I press play. Her voice was quieter than I remembered, unsteady in a way I'd never heard. "Emily," she said, "I saw the release. You did what you had to do. I understand now. You were right. I never saw how hard you worked. And I should have. I hope one day we can talk, for real." It wasn't much. But it was more than I'd ever gotten from her. I didn't reply right away. Part of me didn't know how to. What do you say to someone who's spent most of your life seeing you as the sum of your shortcomings? But the next morning, I wrote her back. Not a long message. Just, "Thanks. I'm not ready yet, but I'm open to talking. In time." That weekend, I returned to Asheville and stood outside my project, the cafe thriving, tenants moving into the upstairs units, the street buzzing with spring energy. I walked into the bakery, the scent of fresh bread and cinnamon warm and familiar, and the owner, Jess, looked up and grinned. "Emily, you're on fire lately. You see the article in Carolina Business Weekly?" I nodded. I'd seen it. They'd done a feature on women developers under 40 reshaping small cities, and there I was. My picture. My name. My quote about building spaces that respect community history and individual grit. I'd cried when I read it. Not because of the spotlight, but because for the first time, someone was telling my story without distortion. They weren't seeing me through the lens of family bias or outdated assumptions. They were seeing me, the woman who fought back, the woman who rebuilt from silence, the woman who refused to be erased. Outside the cafe, an older couple waved to me, asking if I was the developer who saved the building. I smiled and said yes, not the woman who got left out. Not the sister who was always forgotten. The developer, the architect, the rightful heir. Lily reached out that evening with a voice memo. She sounded different, more thoughtful. I just want to say, you were always stronger than me. I thought keeping things calm meant keeping things right, but I was wrong. You deserved better, and I'm proud of you. Truly." I played it twice. Then I saved it. I still had days where the past pulled at me, where I remembered birthday parties I wasn't invited to or whispered comparisons at holiday tables. I remembered watching Ryan bask in praise for projects he never finished and hearing Mom say Lily was the real heart of the family. Those scars didn't vanish overnight, but they no longer controlled me. They no longer wrote the script of my life. I'd seized the pen, and I was rewriting everything. As spring turned into summer, my next project took shape, this time in collaboration with another woman-owned firm. My name would appear on billboards, on permits, on finished buildings, not hidden, not borrowed. Mine. And the family? We weren't whole. But we were. Quieter. Calmer. The lawsuits were settled, the estate divided fairly. And though we still spoke infrequently, there was something honest in the silence now, an acknowledgement, finally, that I had earned my place. That I had been right to fight. I stood on the balcony of my apartment one evening, watching the city move beneath me, a soft breeze brushing my skin, and I thought about Grandma. About how she used to say, the quiet ones are usually the ones who carry the most weight. I think she knew I'd have to carry mine alone. But she also knew I could. I wasn't the poor one anymore. I never had been. They just never looked closely enough to see the foundation I was building all along. Summer settled into Asheville like a soft exhale, and for the first time in years, I wasn't bracing for the next blow. I wasn't looking over my shoulder, waiting for someone to undermine me or question my worth. The war was over. The inheritance was settled. The name I fought for was no longer a whisper behind someone else's success. It was mine, out in the open, unchallenged and intact. The building I developed was alive now, humming with daily rhythm. The bakery opened early every morning, its windows fogged with warmth and promise. The upstairs lofts had been leased to a group of young artists and professionals who added a vibrant layer to the space I once stared at on blueprints. I passed them in the stairwell sometimes, and they'd nod, smiling, unaware of the quiet war that had been waged just to make this place real. That was fine. They didn't need to know the whole story. The fact that I could walk these halls and feel peace was enough. My new routine wasn't grand or dramatic, it was simple, steady. I woke early, brewed strong coffee, and walked the short blocks to my shared studio, where I was now partnering with a local firm that had followed my story and asked to collaborate. They gave me autonomy, respected my work, and never once treated me like I was lucky to be included. I designed a new co-living project with them, something sustainable, inclusive, and deeply community-centered. And every time I signed a new design sheet, I remembered the years I'd been told I wasn't practical enough, not stable enough, not quite enough of anything. Every signature was proof that I had always been more than they realized. Mom and I began speaking in short, careful phone calls. At first, it was awkward, mostly surface-level updates and comments about the weather, the news, the occasional vague mention of Lily or Ryan. But then, slowly, something softened. One night, she called to ask if I had a photo of Grandma's old tea set. She was sorting through things, she said, and wanted to remember what it looked like. I told her I did. I'd kept a photo of it from the week I'd cleaned out Grandma's cabinets, before Ryan and his team came through like bulldozers. I sent it to her. She replied with a simple, unexpected message. Thank you. She'd be proud of what you did. I am too. I just didn't know how to say it. It wasn't everything I wanted, but it was a start. Lily came to visit one Saturday, unannounced but welcome. She brought a pie from a farmer's market and 2 bottles of wine, and we sat on my tiny balcony, watching the sun stretch long shadows across the sidewalk. She apologized again, more sincerely this time, and not just with words, but with a willingness to sit in silence and let me speak. She listened. That was new. She didn't try to smooth it over, didn't defend Mom or Ryan. She just said, I see you now, Em. I wish I had sooner. And I believed her. Ryan stayed distant. I heard from mutual contacts that he was struggling to keep investors happy, that the delays from our legal dispute had cost him more than he expected. I didn't feel satisfaction in his hardship. Only relief that I wasn't still chasing his approval. I had finally detached from the story where I had to prove myself to him. I was done fighting for a seat at his table. I had my own now, solid, hand-built, and surrounded by people who chose to be there. One evening, as I reviewed design drafts in the studio, a knock came at the glass door. It was Mr. Daniels, one of the city councilmen I'd met during the zoning process. He smiled, handed me a small envelope, and said, We're recognizing local developers at the downtown civic ceremony. You're on the list. About time. I thanked him, stunned. I opened the envelope after he left. Inside was an official invitation, printed on thick ivory paper, with my name etched in silver ink. Emily Hart Honoree for Community, Forward Development and Architectural Impact. I cried when I read it. Not loud, not messy, just quiet tears of acknowledgement. I didn't care about the plaque or the ceremony. I cared that someone saw me. Really saw me. That what I'd built mattered. That I mattered. The ceremony was small but meaningful. Friends from the community came, my team showed up, and even Jess from the bakery brought a tray of cookies with my name spelled out in icing. I stood at the podium in a navy blue blazer, hands shaking slightly, and spoke without notes. I thanked those who supported me, who believed in my work before it was trendy or profitable. I didn't mention my family, not by name. But I did say this. For anyone who's ever been underestimated, forgotten, or told they didn't belong, this is proof that persistence matters. That your vision is valid, even when no one else sees it yet. Build anyway. Create anyway. Keep showing up. After the applause, I stepped down, into the crowd, where people smiled at me not with pity, not with doubt, but with genuine respect. I was no longer a background character in someone else's story. I was the protagonist of my own. And the chapter ahead was mine to write. Later that night, alone in my apartment, I stood by the window, wine in hand, the city lights blinking like stars that had decided to stick around. I thought about Dad, about how he'd always believed in me when no one else did. I whispered into the glass, "I made it, Dad. I made it." And somewhere deep in my chest, I felt his quiet nod. No applause. Just steady pride. I had found my place not because they gave it to me, but because I carved it out with grit and grace. The storm had passed. And on the other side, I wasn't just surviving. I was finally free. Sometimes I still wake up wondering if it was all a dream, the contract, the courtroom, the confrontation, the redemption. I lie in bed and let the early morning sun stretch across the hardwood floors, the silence of my apartment gentle instead of hollow, and I think back to the girl I used to be. The one who sat at family dinners afraid to speak too loudly. The one who celebrated career wins alone in her car with takeout and tears. The one who watched her siblings get praised for things she had done better, earlier, but invisibly. That girl still lives somewhere inside me, tucked in the corners of old wounds, but she's not in charge anymore. When I look in the mirror now, I see the lines around my eyes that came from squinting at blueprints under bad lighting and the curve of my mouth that softens when I let myself be proud. I see someone who built a life from scratch not because no one helped, but because no one thought I could. And that matters. It matters because too many people are still living like I waistring to earn their worth in households that rank love by usefulness, families that hand out approval like bonuses at a corporation. If you're reading this and you've ever been the one left out of the group chat, the one they forget to invite until someone remembers last minute, the one they call independent like it's a consolation prize, I want to tell you something. You're not broken. You're not unworthy. You're just unrecognized for now. The hardest part of my journey wasn't the legal battle or the public speaking or even standing my ground when my family tried to erase me. It was letting go of the belief that I needed their validation to be whole. It was realizing that some people, especially the ones closest to you, won't see your value until you stop begging them to. That doesn't mean you become hard or bitter or closed off. It just means you learn to hold your own hand when it shakes. You learn to say, "I know who I am," and mean it even when the room stays silent. There were so many moments I nearly gave up. When the emails went unanswered, when the cease and desist letter landed on my desk like a slap. When I stood outside my grandmother's house, watching a dumpster swallow everything I remembered about her. But every time I hit that wall, I found something deeper inside regret, maybe, or grief turned into fuel. And now, after everything, I know the truth. I was never the poor one. I was the powerful one. I just hadn't been allowed to realize it. I've learned that success doesn't always look like applause or headlines. Sometimes it looks like holding your own in a room where they used to ignore you. Sometimes it's opening your own door instead of waiting for someone to invite you in. Sometimes it's walking away from a legacy that didn't include you and building one of your own. And if reconciliation comes, if apology comes, that's grace, but it's not required for your healing. Forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. Recognition is a gift you give to the part of you that kept going, even when it didn't feel like anyone noticed. The new building is complete now. Every time I walk past it, I see myself not just in the design, but in the process, the sweat, the delays, the blueprints redrawn in frustration. I see my growth carved into concrete and steel. I see a woman who said, "Enough," and turned the word into a blueprint. I've started teaching part-time at the community college, mentoring young women trying to break into architecture and development. I tell them the things no one told me. You don't need to be liked to be respected. You don't need to be perfect to be powerful. And you don't need to be invited to show up like you belong. As for my family, we're not a fairy tale ending. We're not Sunday brunch and photo albums. But there's something quieter between us now, acknowledgement, perhaps. A recognition of truth that can't be unsaid. And maybe that's enough. Maybe being seen, finally, is its own kind of peace. If I could go back and speak to the version of me who stood in that family meeting being called poor, who sat quietly while they discussed legacies without her, I'd tell her this. One day, you'll hold the contract. One day, you'll write the ending. And it won't be out of spite or revenge. It'll be out of clarity. Because when they didn't give you a seat at the table, you built one. And when they didn't give you a voice, you became the architect of your own. To anyone listening, feeling like the afterthought or the invisible sibling or the child who never quite made the cut, hold on. Not just for them to see you, but for you to see yourself. Because when that moment comes, when the silence breaks, when your name is finally spoken with the respect it deserves, it won't be because they finally woke up. It'll be because you stopped waiting.